Welcome to Every Step Podcast. I'm Krystyna Weston.
And I'm Judith Beck.
Every Step is the podcast where career and life meet.
With a new guest every episode, we explore the gutsy issues affecting everyone in the workplace. Our guest today is Deborah Parades. She is one of the most talented people I have met. A stand-up comedian. And if you haven't looked at her video at the Improv in Hollywood, I would say you should do it because it's so funny, Deb. And also, you're a talented singer and musician. Like, hello, you kept that secret from me when I first met you. I didn't know anything about that. So check her albums out on Spotify. It's fabulous music. And she's also an author and public speaker. Deb is now Vice President of Stories and Voices at Swell, an emerging audio platform which connects people from around the world to talk about different subjects they are interested in. Deb has participated in more than 30,000 conversations, including serving as the host for conversations with global thought leaders. So welcome, Deb, and thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I keep things secret so that you can continue to discover me, and that feeds our relationship.
Oh my God. I'm going, like when you sent me all your stuff and the links, and I'm going in there and going, okay, stand-up comedian. First of all, I got to have that coat that you wear in that video. That is amazing. It's so cute.
It's actually a sweater with a little bit of fur on it.
It's adorable. And then I find the music and everything else that's on there. I mean, I could go on. It's just, you're so talented. So thank you so much for coming and sharing this time with us. I'm going to get you to talk about what Swell does as well. So maybe if you could just give us a little, sort of
Elevator pitch.
Sure. No, and just full disclosure, because I met you because of Swell. So I could say that that's how I was fortunate enough to sort of be able to, spin around the world and connect to people. Swell is designed to help people use their voice. That's all. People are used to typing, posting pictures, but the voice is really our soul. And this platform allows for the voice to lead. It also enables you to post pictures. It also enables you to do links, but it's for the voice. So when you post a voice, you have up to 5 minutes, and then people's voices thread in underneath you, just like comments would, but their voices. So the one big part of Swell is it's a social platform using voice. The other part of Swell is it's like a disruptor. It democratizes podcasting because it says, okay, you have a voice, you have a microphone on your phone, say something for 5 minutes. You can reply to yourself if you want to say things for more than 5 minutes. But if something you say in 45 minutes, you probably could say in 5 minutes. That's what we've learned. You see how powerful, 30-second commercials are to change people's minds. So think about 5 minutes of something you want to posit in the world, and you build a Swellcast full of these incredible missives. And sometimes they engender sort of people's enthusiasm and they want to reply. Sometimes they just sit there as soul audio pieces. But we're trying to get people to say, here's a different way to put my voice out. That's inexpensive. It's free, in fact, and it's immediate. So a good example of a good Swell moment for me is when somebody is in a situation and they want to use their voice to say, here I am, here I'm in this moment, I'm snapping a photo, and they could do it without having to go into the studio, but we hear their humanity because voice carries your humanity. And some people don't have a face for video, or they don't want to be in video. So you just drop into the soul of the voice. You don't have to see the visage unless they take a snap. So
and you can hear the tone. You can hear the tone and the emotion that is often missed in the written word.
Absolutely. I love it because on my Swell thing where, people have come in and they've asked questions about whatever topic and connected, and you think, oh, wow, they're really listening. This is really, I go back and then they come back. It's just such a great, it's just such a great app. I love it.
I was in the Bay Area for 18 years and I came in 91 and left in 2009. So I lived through the entire .com boom bust, whatever twirly thing you want to give it like chapters of. But parallel to that was the slow food movement that Alice Waters was starting. Where it was about farm to table and really indulging and having 5-hour meals, and not because you're a time waster, but because you want to appreciate the gathering and the food and the ritual. And sometimes I look at Swell as like a slow food movement of social and of podcasting, because listening takes time. So you don't get that dopamine hit the way you get it when you're just scrolling and hitting and liking and commenting. It's if you drop into someone's story and it conjures up a deeper experience that you keep with you a little bit longer. So I think it'll evolve ultimately as a place where certain kinds of people go to have deeper connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love all the different subjects too. They can go in and find what they're interested in and talk about business or art or current events or books or whatever they want to, and find their group of what they, like-minded people who will chat about something. So
I love what you said around people can say in 5 minutes rather than what they would normally say in 30. And that's so true from a storytelling and a communication perspective. I think we get a bit indulgent and we think the more minutes we speak for, the more important we are or the more valuable we are. And it's actually not how long you speak. It's the succinctness and the power behind your message. And that could be said in 1 minute or 3 minutes or whatever. It doesn't need 30. The rest is embellishment.
And it's an indulgence sometimes, like you said.
Yeah,
I think we're indulgent, Judith. We're indulgent podcasters.
We are.
No, but it's so interesting because the two of you, I've listened to a couple of episodes over time, probably more than a couple, and there's an inclusion in your dialogue and in your joy that is perfect. I mean, I think when two people are vibing and riffing, there's nothing more delicious than that. When it's asynchronous like Swell, you still can get that energy, but it's not live, so it's a different kind of experience. What I love about it most is that if I can't schedule with you and I want to talk to you, I just drop 3 questions up in the top, and then you can answer them over time. So I get to not waste your time, and then we can go back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, asynchronous work, asynchronous communication. There's that theme coming through society at the moment.
Yeah.
That ability to be able to speak to someone, and we see that with some other mediums as well. People are starting to use their voice more in terms of communication.
Because all of us have spoken, to so many people in these last few years, and it's been a tough last few years for a lot of people, especially in the work environment and all over the world. And so I just want to kick it off with what you guys have been seeing. Like, what have you been seeing, Deborah, as far as the temperature out there? How are people feeling from a work perspective? Is there light at the end of the tunnel, or are they still digging the tunnel?
I hear a lot of people, interestingly enough, there's a lot of coaches on Swell that are reacting to what's going on. They're trying to reach people through Swell. So I'm listening. And then there's people that are on the other end that are looking for a conversation to help validate their emotions. I think it's a highly emotional time. And I think people are getting used to the fact that we're living in a very emotional cycle where social media has said, yeah, you can talk about your personal life. I think there's a problem, though, with what you get out of that. And sometimes you get something you didn't think you're going to get. So, we look at the Elizabeth Gilberts and Brene Browns and Glennon Doyles who are teaching us about vulnerability and emotional availability and emotional intelligence. And that's happening parallel to people's true disillusionment with society and government and work. And there's a clash, though, I think, where we haven't been able to figure out what the container is for all this. Because if I'm hiring somebody and I check out their world of social and I see them blubbering all the time about their troubles and about their discordant thinking and their disillusionment and sometimes it's valid, but I cock my head and say, do I want this person on my team because I need her to get shit done? So
Absolutely.
It's like there's a problem, right? I mean, do you guys find that people are wanting to be all those things that these wonderful leaders, especially female leaders, are saying, be whole, be authentic, be yourself, be real? But are we doing too much of that?
Yeah, oversharing. We've had this conversation a lot, Judith and I, that we worry that people are oversharing, and there's a point where, yes, you need to show your vulnerability, but there's a time and place for that. And do you just want verbal diarrhea and vomit on every post? No.
Exactly. And you know what, when you talk about leaders, because this is the one thing that I've heard a lot, and you see it over and over and over again, like show your team that you're vulnerable, that you have these and I'm thinking, when I put my employer hat on of running businesses, I'm thinking I needed to be the person, because we went through lots of cycles. We went through Y2K, we went through the GFC, we went through recessions, all those. If I was the person that went into the office going, oh, woe is me, I'm so blah, 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 I had to actually, as the coach, as the leader, go in with a positive attitude so that I didn't relay that negativity onto my staff and having it come a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's kind of like, I needed to go in, okay, I know it's cold outside, I know it's horrible, but come on, we can do this. Let's dig deeper and go. I had to be the role model. Someone's got to be a role model. Someone's got to.
Is this a pendulum swing, though? I mean, we go through cycles. Is this because we've been so pent up and so boxed in, and now all of a sudden we're all finding our voices, no matter what tribe we belong to? And has the pendulum just swung that little bit too far, and we're using our voice a little bit too much and maybe inappropriately in some places, and it will come back? Or
I think it's a trick question, because listen, I think a lot of people think there's a lot of pendulums that are swinging too far. There's a lot of things going on right now, right? And it's not so hard to find them. But I want to think out loud with you, because I don't know the direct answer to this, but I do think that the other pendulum really sucked for people.
Yeah.
I mean, 1950s were not a fun time to be alive at going to work for IBM. I mean, there was nothing happy about that. So they lump people into millennials and Gen Zs and boomers and Xers. And I think each generation tends to have this archetype attached to them around, like, you complain too much and you're too open about your weekend and you're too buttoned up about your 401k not being. So I think as a society, COVID has shifted us into, oh my God, we're all human beings and we all have to stay home. And that's a human being experience. Like, there was no hierarchy there. We all had to stay home. So it flattened something for everybody for a second. Mm-hmm. And now a lot of the corporate culture is trying to build it back up, especially the work at home conversation and the work at work conversation. But I think if we show up with a balanced inside and outside, that's what we're looking for, right? I don't think any extreme is good. But I think that the parallel world I was bringing up was your social feed is not necessarily how you show up at work, but the two are very tied now. I think, I don't know what to say. I think a lot of there is oversharing on the social feeds. That's not a question, but how does that affect people who are trying to get work? This is what I'm up against. I work with emancipated foster youth who are really serious about getting work out of college, and they need support. And I always say, clean up your social feed. Like, make sure you don't have some weird stuff going on, because I'm going to see it, Yep, but I also I love humanness. I love delight and joy and sorrow even. I just don't want to see it out of control. And that's very subjective. What does out of control mean? I don't know.
Out of control to you is not out of control to somebody else. So
I think it's out of control when you've gone over the norm. Like, in other words, your social feeds, I always used to tell candidates, have a profile, put stuff. You're young, you go to parties, right? You go to parties, so you're going to put pictures of you at parties, but you don't have to put a picture of you at a party that's not appropriate, right? Dancing on tables or shirt down or whatever. Like, if it's not okay for the front page of the newspaper, then it's probably not okay for your employer to see it. So, think about what images, you expect to see young kids having stuff on their Instagram and stuff where they're having fun, going to football games, doing this, doing that. But there's a line. And I'm telling you, I have seen some lines crossed on social feeds for candidates who have applied for jobs.
But are we just being a bit too purist, a bit too pure? What's the expression? Puritanical? Is that the expression? Are we being a little bit?
I think it's a generational thing. If you're working for a company that's all a bunch of Gen Zs, they're not going to have any issue with any of this. There is a
like, get over it. Like, my daughter's generation say, get over it. It's not an issue, Mum.
If you wouldn't show it to your mother or your sister,
but Mum, just get over it.
Get over it. I think I draw the line if they're putting things like sex pics up on their thing.
Yeah, of course, and that's over here.
Like nudity, that kind of stuff. That's kind of drawn over the line.
No, but I think what's also interesting is if you create safety and then take it away, that's bad. And I'll give you a good example of this. So I used to do a lot of employee engagement work. I did some sexual harassment training, some DEI training. This is before 2019. And I remember being in situations where we had some very profoundly safe moments on a Saturday night at a retreat, and there's 40 people in a room and they're really talking because we've set something up so that they can share. Yeah. And then they wake up in the morning, there's brunch, and then there's like this horrible thing that I have to go back to work on Monday. How do I recover from this beautiful, safe place we created where there was sharing? There was not so much griping or anything. It was more like, this is how I feel on a Friday versus a Monday. I wanted to share, like, sometimes the managerial style is not working for my productivity. Like, things are facilitated and we create the space, but then the corporate culture can't hold it on a Monday. So if you're going to try to create a culture of openness and authenticity, you better be able to contain it and make it real and not say, oh, we're done. It's Monday. Get back to work. We're going to be assholes again. Like, we've got to figure out how to build a culture of safety. And, on LinkedIn, you see a lot of famous orators or trendsetters or thought leaders, saying very banal things like, being kind is a good thing, and they'll get 20,000 likes. Gee, I could have said that for 20,000 likes. But there is this saccharine, weird stuff going on where the obvious is being spoken, but obviously it's not that obvious. So far be it for me to judge it, and I just did. But there are people that really are in pain around how to show up authentically at work. Yeah.
They don't, well, because they're going through it probably for the first time.
Yeah.
And they might not have the right mentors or people behind them sort of giving them guidance or, through it. So they're kind of lost. Yeah. And also, I think what we've seen, Krystyna, we were talking about this the other day, is a bit of paranoia. So if people are working from home all the time and they're not going in, then they're being a bit paranoid about what is going on.
Or what's being said about them, or what they're being left out of, or what they're not being included in. Because there's a bunch of things going on.
Yeah, reading more into an email, or reading more into a what's the other one? Salesforce.
Slack, or whatever tool they're using. Teams, whatever they're using.
Yeah, so they're reading, and so they're not, because there's nobody like next to them that they can go, what do you think? So then they dwell on it, and it becomes a thing. And these aren't just junior people; they're more mature and senior people too. So it is isolation has its own issues that cause more issues.
And the blurring, I think, Deborah, you picked up on a point. There's this blurring between home and work now. And we've had this insight through remote work and asynchronous work into people's homes. And we see, hubbies bringing in, or partners bringing in cups of coffees, and dogs wander through, and kids run through. And, there's this, the mask has come down. We don't put on a suit and walk into the office anymore. It's like you're seeing more of everybody. Yeah. And there's this blurring, and we're trying to figure out, well, what are the virtual lines? What are the hard lines?
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the good things that I've seen over the last few years that has been a positive about the whole thing is that it has enabled global conversation in a way that it never had before. And I think that part has enhanced a lot of people's lives and being able to talk to people during times. But then on the other hand, it's also caused isolation in certain other ways. And so there needs to be this balance of trying to find, I think we've had a few people on about working remote, and the thing that comes out the most is intent, and being intentional about the structure and having a structure so that people know where they stand. There's right now a lot of the banks over here, Deb, are calling the employees back. They want them to come back into the office.
Sure. Yeah.
And obviously, if they're wanting, even just 3 days, they want a better.
A lot of resistance.
A lot of resistance, and And I think you kind of wonder, well, why is there resistance? Find out what is the resistance? It's because the cost of driving into the city, the cost of parking, the time it takes. They don't have childcare anymore. I know I've got a few friends that find it very difficult on the childcare front.
Yeah.
And, maybe companies need to go back to start providing, how they used to have childcare facilities in their offices, start providing that or pay for it.
Yeah, I had that when I was a young corporate mum. Childcare in the building.
Barriers away.
Oh, wow, that's cool. That's so cool.
There was one that I saw the story the other day, and I'm going to try to get this guy on. He's head of Vibe. That's the title, head of Vibe with Canva. And everything that he does is about the vibe, because obviously they want people in the office, about the vibe of the place. I think it was on TV, and I saw that they give breakfast and lunch to the staff, and they have all the.
That's back like in the 2000s of .com life when they did that.
Yeah.
Yes, what old is new.
What works, I think what worked in one generation, and I learned this lesson the hard way, we shouldn't give people what we think they want. We need to actually ask what they want.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what people actually want now. And then there's a fine line between, you can't always get what you want. Sometimes you get what you need. So there's that.
You're quoting somebody fabulous, aren't you?
That is.
Well, if you want them back in the office has got to be pretty darn good. And there's got to be a reason for people to go in there. And they're going to, want to love it and be, part of it. And I think I actually, from a temperature point of view, of us talking about the temperature of the market, I'm hearing a lot of people who are saying, I do want to go back into the office. They do want it, not full time though, not full time. They want the flexibility. They still need the flexibility and that type of thing. But they're ready to get back. What was the saying that we had, or that Dr. Simone had? Show up, get up, show up. What was it?
Get up, dress up, show up.
Get up, dress up, show up. And get back in.
That's
there.
Another quote. Get up, stand up.
Oh my God. You hear so many quotes. That's one thing about doing a podcast. You hear so many quotes and so many things that you forget where they come from sometimes.
Right.
So Deborah, what other issues are you hearing about? Because you hear a lot of conversation.
I do. I hear a lot. There's a whole, oh my God, what keeps on creeping up is quiet quitting and quiet firing, like that whole cycle. I'm going to quit before they fire me. We're going to fire them before they quit. It's a, if I typed it in right now, we get all these conversations. There's this sense of like, how do I do that? How do I lead this well without burning bridges? I'm not needed here anymore. I've cycled out. Or how do we get rid of this person who clearly is disinterested, but there's, we want to do it right. I think when you're not sitting around a table every day and getting that warm fuzzy, you're more dispensable. I do think that relationships are built differently from Zoom than they would be sharing a table and having a meal and having coffee and learning about that's the intimacy issue that I think is causing a lot of distrust in a lot of ways. Like, am I really a person, or am I just a person in a box?
That's interesting.
More of a number. I think
a person in a box.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know what quiet quitting was about until I started listening to people on Swell, and there's a sense of disconnection from the end product, like what do I really fit in? Who am I working for? And
there's no purpose. There's no connection to the purpose of the organization, or the organization's got no purpose that I'm aligned to. Is that?
Yeah, I think that there's, with a mission, vision statement stuff, sometimes you'd go to retreats and I did a lot of retreats when I was doing corporate training, and you'd see them come up with their own business unit mission that would complement the company mission. And they take stock in the experience of creating that, whether it was through a creative process or a collaborative or playing games. All of a sudden they had this thing that they created that was about their team. And then you're not seeing a lot of that stuff anymore. And some might say, well, that was, fluff. You don't need that. Let's get to work. But I actually think employee engagement is a big cornerstone to the success of a company, and also for the mental health of the employees. So I think this all circles back to, feeling secure about who you're committing yourself to, whether you're committing yourself to the company or the company's committing themselves to you. I always think it's interesting to think about everybody can turn the tables usually in a company, that they have the people they're reporting to, but then they also have people that report to them, or they have people they're accountable to in their business unit. And you in a given day, you're sort of a child and a parent at the same time. Like I think it's hard to follow all your emotions in one day. If you really want to have the feelies, you're going to get into trouble, because you're going to see how complicated it is to be at a workplace right now. I don't know. My father worked for the government for 43 years, same desk, same Department of Defense, never moved, very simple guy, beautiful soul, but didn't, I always say, was he happy? Did he get fulfilled? And you never asked that question back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. You just didn't. You just did your work.
Yeah.
And I'd rather be living in the 2020s right now. I think it's a great time to be alive, but the complexity of how do I hold myself accountable to my own goals versus the company goal versus people I'm responsible to, it's all one big thing of spaghetti. And I think conversations like this is, if we could streamline them, because we're a bunch of ladies and we could talk about a million things all at once. But I think it's interesting to say, what does it feel like to walk into your home office on a Monday and worry about, did the people you hire last week, did they show up in the way that you would like your bosses to see that they showed up? Like, how do you make that, how do you touch that truth? Like, how do you pull out from people, did they show up, when they worked at home? Like, I don't know, there's that sense of like, how do you measure people's performance nowadays? It's very difficult, And
I think,
it's
yeah,
very, very difficult for managers to manage people right now, because there are so many more things going on these days, as far as what you have to worry about, as far as their mental health and what's happening, because their home life could be one way, and what's going on there. And then, I saw this thing the other day. There's a thing called summer stress now. Summer stress is it's have you seen that? It's this whole new thing about people are stressed because it's summer. And the reason being is because they're looking on their devices and they're seeing their friends on holidays or barbecues or having fun in the summer. And they're wondering, well, how come I'm not having that fun in the summer, or I'm not doing the right thing? So here's
another extension of FOMO, like I'm missing out on something.
Yes, it's another thing. It kind of all goes down to social media and how to handle it, doesn't it? It's kind of like if we were sort of advising, teenagers coming up, you'd kind of go, limit your time and go out and enjoy life. And because this is causing you a lot more stress than you think, which is then going to affect your work life. And there's a whole domino effect.
Just going back to your contemplation about how do we know if people are showing up? I think the mere inquiry into that is a brilliant place to start. Like, I don't know how many leaders, or maybe they do, actually reflect and go, hey, did Sammy and Johnny whoever how were they last week? Were they present? What was going on? I'm wondering whether as leaders we actually have the skills to, one, reflect on that, and two, to have a meaningful, purposeful conversation with those people to actually understand. And let's assume all the KPIs are there and we're not valuing people based on time in, we're valuing on output, and let's assume everybody knows what the job is and all of those sorts of things. But it's about that human connection skill and being able to have that inquiry without being intrusive.
I think building that into a culture, I mean, you have to be deliberate. I would say asking people to be reflective without feeling like what they say is going to be
bite them
in stone and it's going to come back to bite them. I think it's very beautiful to someone say, I wish I had I wish Thursday was a better day for me. I was kind of distracted and yet I did my work, but I feel like, I feel disconnected from what I did. Like, I don't know. I think that that's what I started with the podcast talking about. Like, when do you feel safe to be reflective and vulnerable about your questioning of your own performance without someone saying, well, you said it yourself. You weren't present on Thursday. Well, that's not what I meant. I was very present on Thursday. I was just questioning how it was all fitting into the big picture. I haven't heard about the big picture in now 2 quarters. And I don't know how we're doing as a company, and no one's really talking about it, but I'm just doing my job. And some days are harder than others. And, what does a leader do with that? A leader doesn't dismiss it, but they don't coddle it, because then they're like doing, social services. But I think if you look at a given week, you need 1 hour that week to call it happy hour or something, so people can come together and say, how you guys doing, and have it facilitated. I mean, I still think there's not enough facilitation for people to really know how to speak about things without thinking they're not being safe. Let's move social media aside for a second. I'm talking about, like, on Wednesdays at noon, we're going to have brown bag lunch, Zoom or not Zoom. And we're going to reflect on, everyone's going to have time to say how they're feeling about their own experience at this company. Like, how often do you get that invitation?
You don't.
Yeah.
And it needs to be the people who are facilitating it need to be trained in a way that they need to make sure that they're making the people who are speaking up about how they feel accepted, and that they're not, so that if they say something, somebody else doesn't go, oh, that's crazy, or you're imagining things. Like, they need to know how to be able to nurture the conversation in a way that people feel like they can speak freely without criticizing them. They might critique, but they're not criticizing. Maybe you should try it this way next time. You thought of this, or this is something I did one time that worked. How about you try it this time and see how it goes? If you want my help, I'll help. Something that it's more of a team talk, a team discussion, rather than a hierarchical.
Yeah, I mean, circle is always beautiful, better than the pyramid. I mean, it's nice to sit around. One of the things I really hope that happens on Swell is that more leaders pick up their phone and say something, and then it gets in the newsletter, and people could hear a thought that somebody had about a philosophical comment about the business they're in, or about their own wondering about tomorrow and what will come with the business they're in, or something that's more ephemeral and lovely and inviting. And then whether or not you're safe enough to reply to that CEO or that manager is not really the point. That's their responsibility to give that invitation. But I think that we don't get to hear the thoughts of our leaders enough. We hear their speeches and their annual reports and but we don't hear thoughts enough. And I think that's, sometimes I think that Swell could be a pretty cool place to hear the tone of somebody. That's kind of gentle, and say, this is John. I run the tire division of Goodyear, and we've been having some thoughts about recycling. And, my wife and I took a trip, and we were thinking, wow, wouldn't it be cool if, and just kind of being more human. I wonder if that would create a sense of, like, wow, I heard John Swellcast last week, and he was really letting us into his life. Like, I think that's where
the share price.
Yeah. I don't know. We might be. Sorry.
It's kind of, just here they can talk about the human side. They can still be careful what they say, but they can still say things that make them human to other people, and say, oh, okay, they've had that, they've gone through that, or
It would be so cool if they could. Just people censor themselves all the time for fear of.
And it's a real fear, like we said before, like when I interviewed Steve Wozniak, like almost 3 years ago now, and I said to him, like, this is a new platform where you talk, and he said, yeah, but I want to talk about my RV. I just have an RV with my wife, and we're about to go on a trip. And we talked about his RV for a couple of days, and I was thinking to myself, like, that's a gift. He's not talking about the business or computers or his career. He's talking about his RV. Like, brilliant. I think that we could stand to have that. So I think it's a balance. I also think what's the elephant in the room when it comes to business culture and people is fear of the unknown and change, and the destruction of the planet, and political unrest, and not knowing your daughter's gender at the moment that she might be in your house. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's going through our lives that it's tumult, and wanting to show up and be open to all the news that's out there, and yet going to bed at night, choosing what to perseverate on. Like, am I going to think about this or this? Like, how can I control my brain? And then you have to show up the next day and hope that everything's still the same.
Yeah, it's
might not
exhausting.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely. Well,
exhausting.
one of the things that we said when we started this podcast was that, and we've had to be very careful about who we've had on, because we wanted to have people who we felt would speak authentically and wouldn't be afraid,
right,
to say what they really think, because so many people will not say what they really think because, oh no, this is going to go out and somebody. So a lot of times we don't have people who are necessarily still in the middle of their corporate career, because they're not going to say, oh God, it really sucks working for the bank. But
I think you're bringing up a really interesting point, which is wondering out loud with people is the biggest gift you can give people. It's not like, we're all wise here. We all can talk about a certain level of like understanding, but I think conversations are the best when people are wondering out loud, because we're discovering together. And I could read your book and know your expertise and your framing of a million things, and that's not that book, and it's very helpful. But what's much more exciting as a listening experience is to feel that we're kind of all on this hike and we're looking around and seeing what's showing up in the next hill. It's a very human, open experience. And I have to say, I know you're very into gender, but I think that women have an easier time being imperfect and not full of knowledge. We have an easier time feeling into a situation and saying, oh, let me be here for a second and wonder with you. And I think that's a gift of the feminine instinct, is to sort of nurture a moment that might be unclear, as opposed to bulldozing through it with some fake knowledge or fake confidence that you don't really have.
Well, the thing is, you say into gender. I'm actually not. My
I know it's not into, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, it's more like I'd like to see a future where when somebody comes into the work environment, that they're just seen as that person and not anything else, not a label, not anything else, right? They're that person, whatever their name is, what are their skills and capabilities, that kind of stuff. And that would be the perfect world, that then everybody's equal. And because I just think there's just too many labels on everything these days, and labels tend to box people in and also tend to separate people.
Right.
We've had labels, like I in the book, I actually go over past labels from school, which is more in the old days, the mean girls, the jocks, how we're in high school, there was the geeks, the different groups, right? And right from all through the 4 years, there were labels put on people of different categories. And, the chess club, the glee club, that kind of stuff. And people had a vision of what these people were like. And, and it's kind of like, let's not bring that on into the work environment. Let's just hire Mary or Jim or Susie or who they are. And, that kind of thing. And one day, maybe. So I was talking to somebody the other day they were talking about their resume going out. And, that they felt that they were being discriminated on because of the way they presented their resume and certain names and things like that. And I thought to myself, Jesus, these companies, why, there should be a coding system. Why are we putting names or genders or anything on a resume? To make it fair, send your resume in without a name on it and be a number. And then they will get the long list based on just that person's skills and abilities on that resume. There's always going to be some bias. We'll never, ever get rid of the bias in people's heads, because we won't know what we're dealing with. Yeah. But at least it could get a lot of those people who have been discriminated against in the past on the long list to get the shot and to be able to, so it's just amazing. I mean, I think the young ones today are going to improve things. Every generation improves things. And what we got to do is just take the good part out and then bring that, or every crisis that we have, something good comes out of it.
Yeah.
You know? something.
No, it's true. I think that when you talk to a young couple who's having kids, it's very important to talk to them and ask them why they're having kids and what their belief system is to have the courage to have kids and to have the courage to build the future with another little being, given all the things that seem scary. And you get some really cool answers. And I think we have to get out of the way a little bit with our cynicism and our fear and our discomfort and even our knowledge, because that knowledge can be moved over and shifted by someone else's sense of what this version of their knowledge is, and it blows our minds. And I love my nephews. They're all in their their 20s and 30s, and my nieces as well. And I get great joy from just listening to them and shutting up.
Well, yeah, because you learned things from them. There's a thing called reverse mentoring, where how you're prepared, you mentor someone who is more junior, but then you also have someone more junior mentor you on the up and coming. And so technology and that can be really rewarding for people.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because it's all about listening to the other. The problem starts when there's division and people won't listen to each other, and they won't ask, well, why do you feel that way? Well, why are you, if you don't hear the reasons, you're never going to have empathy or understand what they're going through.
And this is where the whitewashing of people's individual identity is a problem. I love your vision, and I want you to feel like there's going to be a place where we all get along and we're all considered the same thing. But then the other side of that is completely contrary to what you're saying, which is sort of the area I live in more, which is show me your difference, show me your complexity, show me how it feels to be you, and let me leverage that diversity into the world I'm creating for us. Because I think there was this sort of puritanical way of like, we're all a bunch of same people and we're going to make this car, but then that car is not that interesting.
Yeah.
And I'd rather live in a world where we're not tolerant of each other, we're celebrating our differences and we're acknowledging them as assets to the company. So that's a different vision from my perspective. And sometimes you have to do that on purpose, like not to get too political about what's going on in America, but I think affirmative action was a very good thing. And that we don't have it now is kind of a nail in the coffin of celebrating the fact that we on purpose want many people to reflect the many people in our country, in our institutions. And when we don't have that, we get lazy, and all of a sudden we're going back to a very monolithic, monochrome, homogeneous world. And because a lot of people that need to be affirmed are marginalized financially in other ways, so they can't even get in the room. And because when affirmative action is dead, they're not in the room anymore. And there's lots of stories about how, that's not true. It's just physics of how people move through space and time. Affirmative action was a way to keep things open. Yeah. So
We've got a similar debate going on in this country at the moment.
I'm sure you do. When I was in Australia, I was really struck by how white most of my experience was, and how yet there's such a consciousness about the Aboriginal culture and how we should celebrate the land we're on. That was always in my face every second, which is beautiful, but it didn't show up in my daily experience in Australia. So I was like, well, where are these wonderful people that we're honoring their land? We're all trying so hard.
We're all trying so hard.
And maybe it's probably because Australia's so far away to get here. The travel time limits.
Yeah, we've been round and round in terms of conversations.
I think the thing is that you're right, absolutely, Deb. The diversity. Who wants to work in a company? Wouldn't, where everybody's exactly the same. Because if you have diversity of thought, diversity of people, you're going to get a better outcome, because then there's going to be brainstorming and different ideas, and things like that. Always works, been proven. The issue with with what's happening right now with resumes and things like that is that from the filtering process, there's a human aspect, and the people who are in a marginalized areas or groups may not be getting even in the door because of that. So therefore, how do we take that away to make sure it doesn't happen? Because you can say everything to the companies, you need to have so many from this, that, and the reality is something different.
Yeah.
And then also the interviewing panels, the people who do the interviewing in the large organizations, those aren't diverse.
Mm-hmm.
I was in recruitment for 25 years. They're farthest thing from diverse. And so you've got then people who are interviewing either one person or a panel of all the same people. And who are they going to hire? People that are like them.
Yeah,
so
people are tribal. Yeah.
It goes with that same intent, that you've got to have intent about who you've got to. I wouldn't hire someone unless they were up to the job. So but I think you've got to get the people there, and they have to have opportunity. They have to have equality and opportunity to get there to the first place, so that I can meet them and interview them, and then have a fair panel. Like, in the old days, it used to be men and female, women and men. It was all about that, man and women.
All the good old days.
Good old days, man and women. Okay, well, how hard is that? Have a panel of half men and half women. Really seriously, and have a long list and a short list of half men and half women, and put them through the same, the same process. And
very different.
I'd have people that would. I remember one particular role where it was with a bank, and they said, we want a female to run this financial planning company. And when I saw the position description, I said, first of all, there's not one woman in Australia that has 5 to 10 years plus experience. That's what you have in your position description, because no one's ever hired one, and you want one, there's not one.
Oh,
so
right.
You have to change your requirements. You have to have a next stepper. And I said, I'm not bringing women up just to fill your quota of the short list or the long list. You have to be intentional, that you are really serious about and then if it's a next stepper, I can give you 10. I can give you 10 next steppers that would be brilliant in the job, but they're going to need some guidance and things like that. And so it's all, it it takes time, but it takes intent, and it takes.
And we bump into good ideas, and that's what conversation's about. And that's what this whole I think one of the brilliant things about creating space to talk is, if you get one gem out of an hour conversation, you're doing great. I hope we got a gem out of this, but I feel like because you bump into this moment of clarity, which is the wondering part. Like, I might not know an answer, but if you give me the comfort to figure it out with you, I might come up with something I never would have had I not been in conversation with you. So I think it's always good to talk and to create the space to talk. And I think that's the theme. If everyone keeps talking, then they're not stuck.
Exactly. And having a diverse workforce. I mean, the old groupthink, remember groupthink? Well, that's why I would love to have a team of people from all over the place, different ages, and also age. Like, we can have a whole new podcast about age discrimination.
I'm the oldest one in my company by, I think, like 12 years.
Wow.
That is a huge thing. It is a huge thing. And it's, it's a shame, actually, because they will say women over 50 are among the highest in homelessness because they can't get jobs.
That's a whole other conversation. But it's worth having, because I think
definitely worth having.
Because I think that there's a lot of like strong people on the internet, on social media saying, I'm going to age out loud and gracefully, and I'm not done. I'm but the truth of the matter is they turn off their camera and they're like filling themselves with Botox, and they're trying to become who they're saying they don't want to become. So there's a lot of internalized hatred that they have for themselves.
That's a brilliant conversation to have.
It's a brilliant conversation. That's a panel of a lot of people. I mean, I know I'm going to be 58 in September, and I celebrate every year I've lived. But I do know that less and less do I announce my age to people. Less and less. Not because I'm uncomfortable, they're uncomfortable. They're like, wow, my mom's age. Wow, that's super weird.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
I'm sure your mom's a lovely person. Why is it weird? Because it's weird.
Yeah,
ladies, we could talk forever. So, very final words. Deborah, you go first in terms of what's. I mean, we've covered a lot of territory in this conversation.
Final word. I have final words. Keep talking. Keep inviting people to talk. Don't be afraid of not being articulate. Just say what's on your heart, and that will cover most of the value of what you said, because it's coming from you. And don't edit yourself to the extent that you are not speaking your truth. But, just be out there, because it's going to resonate with somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. Judith?
Yeah, I would say that, if you're out there and you're feeling not yourself, or you're not feeling light at the end of the tunnel, that you just need to remember that you have it in you to find that light, and you have strength to be able to find it. And it is up to you, and it is your responsibility. So your first step is surround yourself with positive people who are going to give you that motivation and help you. Don't try to do it alone. Why try to do anything alone? I just, try to, whether it's resourcing online inspiration or reading books for inspiration, whatever it is, you've got, you and you alone are the only one that can help you get out of that rut. First step. And then the second step is to get the help.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you, Judith. Deborah, it's been fantastic. Fantastic having you on the program. For our audience, go and check out Swell if you haven't already, and start some conversations. Thanks, Deborah.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.
For more information about Every Step and our guests, head to everysteppodcast.com. To be notified of new podcasts, please subscribe via your favourite listening platform. And of course, follow us on social media and direct message us to share your ideas about guests or topics.